You have one of these in your resumes, it's a good way of losing that job. Tell me if this doesn't sound like someone you might know. Let's say you're out there wanting to find that new job. You're applying to a bunch of places online, maybe through referrals, maybe through your friend Pedro, I don't know, whoever it might be, and you never get a call back. You do it 10, 12, a dozen times, nothing. You get nothing back and you just don't know what's going on. Maybe because you're inexperienced, maybe because you're applying for the wrong job, maybe you're saying the wrong things. What is actually happening? Well, one of the biggest factors of people not calling you back for an interview is your resume. If your resume is bad booty, then you ain't gonna get a call back from no one, even if they know you. Trust me. I have seen horrible resumes in the past, and honestly, it's just so simple. There's a reason why they don't call you back with a bad resume, and I'm just gonna go into how to make your resume good enough to land that six-figure salary. And in the video, I'm gonna show you my own resume, at least a template that I use, and a real-life example of what you should be doing with your resume. Stay tuned. So when it comes to resumes, you have to understand that there's going to be a few people looking at your resume before the decision to give you the interview is actually made. So the first person that will probably go through is the online component if you're going through something like Indeed.com, Dice.com, one of those places that are job posting sites. Those places will have their own background filter that will try to look at your keywords in your resume and make sure that you have at least most of them or some of them before they probably take it to their HR person or the lead or whoever is in charge of looking at these resumes. It's usually the HR. But sometimes you don't have to go through that if you're not going through a job site and you're just handing it to, let's say, a recruiter, or you have a referral and you're actually giving them the physical resume without going through all that software stuff. Either way, we're here to improve what your resume should look like. So let's go over a few things that your resume should have. The 3 things that you're going to need to make sure that your resume has, and for me to not throw away your resume when I see it, is that it first has to look good. So you have to have good formatting. That does not mean that your resume has to be the flashiest resume. It doesn't even have to have your picture in it. Honestly, you're probably better off not having that because sometimes the software doesn't read it too well, doesn't read pictures very well, and it might confuse it and give you a bad result. So I would just avoid it. Also, your formatting has to be clean, on point. I'll show you an example of what I mean, and just simple. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. As long as you have the right information on your resume, it's going to be fine. You also have to have the experience on the resume as well. I know that if you're new, that's a little bit tougher, but you have to somehow bridge that gap, and you can do it either through projects or through writing your skill set in there. So skill set in the form of keywords, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about. A lot of people have a lot more skills than they give themselves credit for. If you work or have a project that involves a bunch of different things together, you probably have more skill sets than you realize. This includes even the IDEs that you use. Let's say you're using something like C# and you're using Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code as your IDE. Do you have that on your resume? If you don't, you're missing out because a lot of people do look for the IDEs that you're using. Not only that, but they also look for the programs that you're working with and the libraries you're working with. So if you're looking for a JavaScript library, let's just say Telerik, maybe jQuery, if you have something like that, add those to your resume. It's not just JavaScript. You're using an actual framework. People are looking for specifically. So anything that can get you more keywords in your resume that you actually have experience in will be better for you because that's what they're looking for. That's what the filters are looking for. And that will just increase the chances that your resume ends up in the hands of the final person who decides on your resume and gives you the interview. So to quickly recap, you need to have good formatting, enough keywords that match the job description, and your experience. Yes, I said before that for some jobs, the experience is a little less mandatory, but once you reach like mid-level, senior level, then it becomes more of a requirement than something that they just would like to have. I'm about to show you my resume. I tweaked it a little bit so that there's not, my personal information and stuff like that on there, but the actual formatting and the keywords there are still the same. So you can just extrapolate on that and look to see if this is how your resume looks like or not. Now, remember, I have a lot of experience and I have a lot of technologies under my belt, so I can leverage that more. If you don't, I'll show you how to leverage what you have, which is maybe you have projects under your belt. If you don't, maybe you have certifications, stuff like that. I'll go into it. Don't worry. As promised, this is my resume. This resume has been tweaked for this presentation, but the formatting and everything in here is basically what I use, except that I removed the information in there. So before I continue going this, let me give a caveat when it comes to the education portion here. If you don't have like a degree and you're trying to get a job, you have to somehow make up for that, because the degree is kind of a prerequisite for a lot of these jobs and a way to weed you out if you don't have it. So you either have to have a pretty good certifications and pretty good work experience as well. So that's the only way to really make up for it. It's not impossible, it's just more difficult. Anyways, my philosophy when it comes to writing my resumes is that it has to be simple, concise, easy to read, and have all the components that I mentioned before, aka keywords, formatting, and my work experience. Those are the most important things on this resume. I know that a lot of you out there have a lot of these flashy resumes, and I think they're a bad idea, and I'll explain why. But before I do that, I will go over my resume and explain, what's going on here. So you see that I have my name, my phone number, my email. I want to add my LinkedIn here as well. I think that's a good idea nowadays. If you have a LinkedIn account, add that there too. I just didn't have it on this one. Then you have your education. If you have a degree, put your degree here. And if you have any certifications, put it here. So I like putting them in the front so that the recruiters know that I have the prerequisites needed to land the job before the work experience. So here is where the real tests are, which is my technical skills. I write the same things over again, not to just take up space, but also to ensure that the keywords aren't missed by any online programs or any OCR programs out there that might read it and then make a mistake and not catch it or whatever. So what I mean is that when your resumes go into the HR, or before they go into the HR, they get scanned sometimes by these jobs, and they will look for keywords automatically and see if you have any number of keywords. The more you have, the less likely it is to screw up. Not only that, but I've also separated them into easy to, for a person who isn't very technical, they will understand what this means and match it to whatever the job description is. So I have programming and scripting here, which is a little bit different than experience in software development. So that just in case they're not very apt when it comes to technology, it makes it easier for them to understand what I have. So in this case, I not only have my languages here, I also have the technologies that I've also worked with, including those like the IDEs that I've used, Visual Studio Code, and the repository technologies like SourceTree or Git or whatever. So if you don't have Git on your resume, that's a really bad thing, because as a lot of people have it for their job descriptions. So that's just a little hint for you guys. Apart from that, I write all my technologies that I've used, even if they're not languages, like IDEs and stuff. I've used SOAP UI, and I've used Postman, all that good stuff. So any technology you have touched in your development journey, add that here, and make sure you add it, either capital case, lowercase, whatever. Just make it clear and concise. And finally, the work experience. So my work experience is pretty easy. There's a whole section just devoted to it, and the section goes by me having, where I worked, what I did, and from when to when. So from what year to what year. And then on the bottom, I have past tense verbs in my resume, and that's what I like sticking with. It's a very easy way of saying that I did this, and it's very implicit, and it also shortens whatever it is that you did in your job to one sentence or less. And I like to keep at most 4 bullets per each job. So try not to write a novel, but also don't make it too short. Make it good enough so that people get a good idea of what you did, and maybe not embellish, but make it sound very, very important. So I've seen some things that were funny that people try to pull, and I'll go over that after this. But for some of you out there who don't have that much experience, write whatever experience you have, and then write your projects in here. So explain what projects you did, what technologies went into this project, and hopefully you have that project to show in the interview if you're going for one of these entry-level jobs. That will help you greatly when you get to that next step. But if you don't, write it here after the work experience. That will help you. So my resume is ultra simple, And there's not much more to it than just me writing everything in nice, simple terms and ensuring that the keywords are also correct. And anything that I've ever worked on has been written in the technical skills area, along with a small, concise description of my job responsibilities in the work experience area. So I'm going to go over some bad resumes and some stuff that I've seen while I was working in companies, reviewing interviewees and stuff like that. So we're going to get into some of the bad resumes, and I think this is a good example of a bad resume. I think you've seen one of these before. Let me see if I could just... Yeah, that's a lot better. So if your resume looks like this, one that has like the face and then it has one of these things down here. Let me see if I could show you. There we go. If it has one of these skill things, these are terrible resumes. These do not induce confidence in the person who is reading them. Number one, this is very hard to print out. So if they want to print out your resume, you're wasting a lot of ink and they don't appreciate that. That's number one. Number two, this right here will kill your chances of getting the job or whatever. The reason for that is because you're basically saying, I am not good enough to be the best in whatever the skill set is, whatever it is, whatever technology you're writing in for your particular resume. If you write, I'm kind of mediocre on it, I'm like halfway here, no, I don't have that much experience on some other technology over here, they're going to pass you over because you've already basically did an interview for yourself and you gave them the information from that interview saying that you're inadequate. So please don't do that. Don't write these things here. Do not tell them what you think your skill level is. That is for them to determine when you get the interview. Get the interview and then ace the interview. It doesn't matter what you think your skill set are. This imposter syndrome thing is not going to help you land a job. So just quit that right now. Not only that, but this face thing, this doesn't help as much as you might think. Reason for that is because not only do I don't know, I find it kind of obnoxious, to be honest, but that's a personal thing. But there are some jobs out there that have really crappy OCRs and they might not be able to read this and that might make a mistake over here or something. So something could happen during the scanning process and then your resume gets scanned incorrectly, and that's just because you decided to put a photo there or decided to have a lot of nonsense that you really don't need. I don't even know why you would want something like this here. Like to be honest, like if you already have all your information here, they don't really need to know where you live. But anyways, yeah, I just don't like these kinds of resumes. I think they reveal the bad aspects of yourself and they make it seem worse for the person who's reading them and puts you in a bad light already. Compared to something like I use something very simple and basic, and like you might think this is a good idea, but it really isn't. However, yeah. So now you've seen an example of a resume that has been getting me results specifically. I've been landing 6-figure contracts with that resume, and a resume that I hate seeing. I think that resume, especially when it comes to that skill level thing, is a very terrible resume, and it preemptively weeds you out of the process if you don't have like the full skill set ready to go. If the people looking at your resume think that you're inadequate in a skill set or think that you're inadequate in a skill set, then they're just gonna find someone else. It's really easy because they get a lot of candidates. So you're right that if you use a template like the one that I use, it doesn't stand out that much, but it also doesn't have all the drawbacks that the other one does. And at the end of the day, the people who are going to be receiving the resume after the HR people are going to be technical individuals. They won't care how flashy your resume is going to be. You might think that because you learned in psychology or something that people like pretty colors and stuff like that. That's not how it works. When you're dealing with other developers at some point and they're not going to care how good it looks, they're going to be suspicious about it. They're going to say, hey, this person is using so much glitz and glamour that maybe we should really read the resume even more to make sure that they're not trying to distract us. And that's what happens. I know that some people do try to use flowery language in their when they do their job descriptions, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it makes it sound much more important than what it is, and sometimes it just goes over the top. For example, someone who had like a librarian job in one of their resumes used the words they had their books battle ready for for something, and it's like all you were doing was just organizing books in the library, which is kind of funny. But I'm just saying that there is a point where you go too much into it. Just say that you developed something, you program something, worked on something, blah blah blah, whatever it is. Strike that balance between over the top importance and something that you don't find particularly important. We don't have that knowledge when we look at your resume, so we don't really know too much about what you've been through until we actually interview you. If you do write a resume, make it as concise as possible. Make it easy for us to read. That's why everything that you see before the work experience, like my skill sets and my education, is on the front page. And then my most recent work is also on the front page. So that's what you kind of want, because that's what people are going to be limiting themselves to. They're probably going to get a bunch of resumes. You're going to be looking at the first 2 pages at most, and maybe not even that. So put all the good stuff in your resume in the front page. That's why I say don't use something like the pink one that we saw earlier. I think that wastes too much space, and you need all the space you need to have all the good points in that one page as much as possible. Other than that, I wish you all luck. I hope that you've gained something out of my resume video. That is what a 6-figure resume looks like. It's not as flashy, it's not as glitz and glamoury, but it is solid. It has landed me quite a few jobs. And if you do go and want more consulting for free, I'm willing to give you that very same template that you saw here today. So just go on my website, book an appointment, 15 minutes, free session. You have nothing to lose. So, good luck with that. Hopefully this helps some of you out. If your resume does not look like mine, basically, if your resume looks like garbage, that's why you're not landing the jobs, and you need to fix it right away. Spend more time on that resume. Also, forget your cover letters. Cover letters are useless. I have not used a cover letter when getting these jobs. So spend your time doing the resume instead of the cover letter. Anyways, peace out.